In late summer of 41 BCE, the Roman general Mark Antony stood on the dock at Tarsus and waited. He had summoned Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, to answer for her loyalties in the recent civil war. When her royal barge finally appeared on the river Cydnus, the sails were dyed Tyrian purple, the oars beat the water in time to flutes, and the perfume around her was so heavy that Plutarch, writing more than a century later, recorded the multitudes on the riverbank caught the smell on the breeze before they saw her face. Antony was 25 years older than her. He surrendered before she stepped ashore. 2,000 years and a few thousand miles west, a 26-year-old fashion publicist on her lunch break in Midtown Manhattan would pay a man on the corner of 39th Street and 7th Avenue a few dollars for a small glass vial of musk oil. The vial would travel with her into a marriage with America's most photographed family. A quarter century after her death, the smell of that small glass vial would still be one of the most copied perfumes in the country. What follows are 15 lives traced by what they wore on the skin. Some bottles still sit on department store shelves. Others are kept behind glass at the Château de Versailles. One Paris perfume house spans 3 of the women in this video across 200 years, and one modern perfumer composed scents for 2 of them, 2 centuries apart. 1. Cleopatra, 69 to 30 BCE. What the multitudes on the riverbank were smelling has only been known to science for about 10 years. In a series of excavation seasons, beginning around 2012, the archaeologists Robert Littman and Jay Silverstein recovered residues from glass amphorae at Tel Tamai, the site of the ancient Egyptian city of Mendes. Working with chemists at the University of Hawaii, they identified the components of what was likely Cleopatra's signature blend. Myrrh and cardamom held the heart. Cinnamon and resin gave it weight. The whole formula sat on an olive oil base. The result was thick and resinous, medicinal in a register no contemporary perfume shares. It was closer to an ointment than a spray. On the skin, the perfume warmed into incense smoke and dried herbs with something sweet underneath that no Roman soldier had ever encountered before. 2. Catherine de' Medici, 1519 to 1589. Before Catherine de' Medici left Florence in October of 1533 to marry the future Henri II of France, the French court was not a perfume culture. After her, Paris became the perfume capital of the world. The line between those two facts is one 14-year-old girl and the men she brought across the Alps with her. She arrived with her own personal perfumer, a Dominican-trained friar named Renato Bianco, and with a citrus bergamot fragrance the friars at Santa Maria Novella had blended for her wedding. The pharmacy where they made it had been operating in Florence since 1221. It has not closed since. The fragrance is sold today as Acqua della Regina in the same building, by some of the same religious order. On the skin it carries the cool of a Mediterranean morning, citrus over an herbal base of lavender and rosemary. The darker footnote is what Bianco did once Catherine, by then Queen of France, installed him in a perfumery on the Pont au Change in Paris. He is the source of the legend of the Queen's poisoned gloves. The most famous victim is Jeanne d'Albret, mother of the future Henri IV, who died in Paris in June of 1572 after handling a pair of perfumed gloves rumored to have come from Catherine's perfumer. 3 months later, the wedding for which Jeanne had come to Paris ended in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. 3. Marie Antoinette, 1755 to 1793. There is a reason Marie Antoinette's perfume is connected to her capture at Varennes on the night of June 21, 1791, and the reason has nothing to do with the strength of the smell. She had fled Paris with Louis XVI in disguise, dressed as commoners. They got as far as the small town of Varennes before being recognized and turned back. In the lore that has grown up around the flight, the queen carried her favorite Houbigant fragrance with her. Any postmaster who had been to Versailles, as Drouet the postmaster had been, would have recognized that smell instantly. No peasant could afford the orange blossom and jasmine of a Paris house that had supplied the royal household since 1775. In 2005, the Château de Versailles commissioned the perfumer Francis Kurkdjian to recreate Marie Antoinette's personal scent from period notes preserved in the royal household archives. The result is Sillage de la Reine, sold only at the Versailles boutique in a hand-blown crystal flacon for several €1,000s. The fragrance opens like Versailles in June, orange flower and jasmine over a powdery iris. 4. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821. The French National Archives in Paris still hold the receipt. October of 1808. 72 bottles of eau de Cologne ordered for the emperor in a single month, paid out of the imperial household. Madame de Rémusat, lady-in-waiting to Empress Josephine, recorded in her memoirs that Napoleon poured the cologne over himself after every bath, going through as many as 60 flacons in 30 days. His perfumer, Jean-Marie Farina of Paris, designed a slim green bottle called a rouleau that slipped into the leather of an officer's boot. Napoleon carried it through every campaign of the empire. The cologne was alcohol-based, which meant it acted as an antiseptic. After Austerlitz and Wagram, Napoleon ordered it distributed to the field surgeons to clean wounds. Captured British soldiers later reported the smell was strong enough to identify a French command tent from 40 paces. In exile on St. Helena after 1815, the eau de Cologne ran out. Napoleon had his Corsican valet improvise a recipe from bergamot oil and the few citrus and herbal ingredients available on the island. He washed himself in it until his death in 1821. The notes were always the same: lemon and bergamot at the top, like a clean kitchen on a summer morning. Underneath, a heart of neroli, the oil distilled from the white blossoms of the bitter orange tree. Napoleon was born on Corsica, where bitter orange grows wild. He wore the smell of his own childhood. 5. Empress Josephine, 1763 to 1814. Josephine, Napoleon's first wife, kept the largest rose garden in Europe at her Château of Malmaison, west of Paris. 250 varieties. During the Napoleonic Wars, she had ship captains crossing enemy lines specifically to deliver new cuttings to her gardeners, including English varieties that came through diplomatic channels, because France and Britain were at war. Her bedroom was a different ecosystem. She perfumed the rooms at Malmaison with such intensity that visitors decades after her death in 1814 reported the smell still lingered in the woodwork. Her preferred notes were musk, civet, vanilla, and violet, layered until the air itself seemed thickened by them. When the property was restored in the late 19th century, conservators had to physically air the perfume out of the Empire-style mahogany of her boudoir. Her musk was so strong that Napoleon, after their divorce in 1809, allegedly could not tolerate the smell of musk on any other woman for the rest of his life. The marriage had been the most heavily perfumed in European history. The end of it left him allergic to the memory. 6. Empress Elisabeth of Austria, 1837 to 1898. Elizabeth of Austria, the woman known to history as Sissy, was the most photographed beauty of the Habsburg court. Her hair, when she allowed it down, fell to her ankles. It was washed once every 3 weeks in a cocktail of egg yolks and cognac. The process took an entire day, during which she conducted her state correspondence through her ladies-in-waiting. She slept in leather face masks lined with raw veal or strawberry pulp. She refused to be photographed after the age of 31 because she could not bear to age in public. Her scent was violets, the flower she sewed into her ball gowns and distilled into her toilette water. Her supplier was Lubin, the Paris perfume house founded in 1798. Their violet fragrances arrived at Schönbrunn Palace by the case. She also ate violets. De Mel, the imperial confectioner in Vienna, made her a violet sorbet that was one of the few foods she would consistently take from the kitchens. On September 10, 1898, Sissi was assassinated in Geneva by an Italian anarchist named Luigi Lucchini. He stabbed her on the lakeside promenade with a sharpened needle file. She was 60 years old. Violet smells like a flower pressed in a book, powdery and slightly sad. 7. Greta Garbo, 1905 to 1990. Greta Garbo retired from cinema at 35 and lived the second half of her life in a New York apartment she rarely left. The line "I want to be alone" came from her 1932 film Grand Hotel and became her real-life signature.
I want to be alone, but one day I shall find myself alone.
She guarded her privacy obsessively. She wore little makeup, her perfume she committed to for 60 years. In 1929, with the Wall Street crash gutting Patou's American clientele, the perfumer Henri Almaras composed Joy, 10,600 jasmine flowers and 28 dozen Bulgarian roses per ounce, marketed as the costliest perfume in the world. Garbo adopted it the year it launched. Bottles were delivered to her building at 450 East 52nd Street through the 1980s, accepted at the front desk by a doorman who had standing orders not to ring her apartment. She came down for them when she chose. Joy smells like a hot greenhouse full of jasmine in July, with the indolic shimmer of white flowers crushed against warm stone. 8. Audrey Hepburn, 1929 to 1993. Hubert de Givenchy met Audrey Hepburn in his Paris atelier in the summer of 1953. He was 26, recently independent, and had been told to expect Katharine Hepburn for a fitting on a film called Sabrina. The slight woman who walked into his salon, wearing flat shoes and a gingham shirt, was someone else entirely. He dressed her for the rest of her life. He served as one of the pallbearers at her funeral in Tolochenaz, Switzerland, in January of 1993. In 1957, Givenchy composed a fragrance for her on a base of violet and woods, with jasmine at the heart. When he asked permission to release it commercially, she replied, "Je vous l'interdis, I forbid it." He named the perfume L'Interdit and put her face on the print campaign. For 7 years, she allowed her image on no other fragrance. The 1957 register is soft, powdery violet over iris, a perfume that walks into a room expecting nothing. 9. Grace Kelly, 1929 to 1982. 6 weeks before her wedding in Monaco, Grace Kelly was on the MGM lot in Culver City, finishing a film called High Society. Her last on-screen kiss was with Bing Crosby. She then boarded the SS Constitution with 80 pieces of luggage, 2 poodles, and a wedding gown whose lace had been made by 36 seamstresses over 6 weeks of 14-hour shifts. In April of 1956, Prince Rainier III of Monaco commissioned the perfumer Olivier Creed to compose a fragrance for his bride to wear at their wedding. The result, Florissimo, was sprayed not only on Grace's skin, but on her bridal bouquet itself, Bulgarian rose, tuberose, violet, and ylang-ylang. The wedding guest list included Aristotle Onassis, Cary Grant, David Niven, Ava Gardner, and the entire Kelly family from East Falls in Philadelphia. 30 million people watched live on television, the largest broadcast audience the medium had ever held. Florissimo carries the air of an entire wedding chapel, rose and tuberose with a sweetness underneath that does not let you forget where you are. 10. Jackie Kennedy, 1929 to 1994. Jacqueline Kennedy first walked into the Krigler boutique inside the Plaza Hotel sometime in the early 1960s, while she was First Lady. She found a fragrance there called Lovely Patchouli 55. Blended in 1955 by Albert Krigler, the German-born chemist, who had founded the house in Berlin in 1879 and opened his first boutique in Paris in 1909. By the 1930s, Krigler perfumes were being sold at the plaza, where the boutique still operates today. Lovely Patchouli 55 became Jackie's signature, and it followed her through both of her marriages. When Aristotle Onassis proposed to her in 1968, the bottle of Lovely Patchouli 55 he gave her was part of the proposal itself. The fragrance has bergamot at the top, sharp and clean, with patchouli, leather, and amber at the base, warmed by red fruits and a thread of vanilla. Jackie wore it 10 years before patchouli was associated with the late 1960s and the counterculture, and on her, it read as antique rather than rebellious, the smell of an old leather-bound book in a private library. 11. Marilyn Monroe, 1926 to 1962. In April of 1952, the columnist Earl Wilson asked Marilyn Monroe what she wore to bed. Why, Chanel No. 5, of course. The answer ran in newspapers across the country within a week and changed how perfume was marketed for the next 40 years. Chanel No. 5 had been blended by the perfumer Ernest Beau in 1921, the 10th aldehyde sample he showed Coco Chanel that afternoon at the Parfumerie outside Grasse. It is the most famous soap and powder smell in the history of fragrance. In July of 1962, 6 weeks before her death in Brentwood, Marilyn sat for a photo session with the photographer George Barris on a stretch of beach near Santa Monica. Barris had set up a dressing area in a borrowed beach house. On the dresser, photographed in passing, sat a bottle of Chanel No. 5. What is less remembered about Marilyn is that she rotated. The Florist Archive at 89 Jermyn Street, London, holds a 1959 receipt for a bottle of Florist Rose Geranium, addressed to Marilyn Monroe Miller at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the surname taken from her then-husband, the playwright Arthur Miller. She wore Florist when she wanted to disappear, and Chanel when she did not. 12. Princess Diana, 1961 to 1997. Diana Spencer's signature fragrance through her royal years was Oubigant Quelques Fleurs, the same Paris perfume house that had supplied Marie Antoinette and the Empress Josephine. On the morning of her wedding to Charles in July of 1981, however, multiple accounts say she chose something different. Penhaligon's Bluebell, the British house's 1978 floral. By the time she reached the carriage to St. Paul's Cathedral, she had spilled some of it on the front of her Emmanuel-designed gown and was trying to wipe the stain away without anyone noticing. 750 million people watched live on television. The smell of Bluebell traveled down the aisle on global broadcast. Bluebell smells like the woods behind your grandmother's house in late April. Green, cool, wet, with the faintest sweetness of small flowers underneath. After her divorce from Charles in August of 1996, Diana switched away from the Houbigant of her royal years and made Penhaligon's Bluebell her primary daily wear. The same bottle she had carried down the aisle as a bride became the smell she went home with at the end. She wore it for the last year of her life. 13. Andy Warhol, 1928 to 1987. Andy Warhol kept what he called his permanent smell collection. Every fragrance he had ever worn went onto a single shelf at his East 66th Street townhouse. Half-empty bottles of Chanel No. 5, Yves Saint Laurent Pour Homme, Halston, Estée Lauder Youth Dew, and dozens more. The collection is now held by the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. His rule was 3 months. He wore a single fragrance for exactly that long, then forced himself to switch, even if he still loved it, so the smell would forever carry the memory of those 3 months. He sneaked into hosts' bathrooms at parties to test their colognes, splashing himself liberally and then becoming paranoid the rest of the night that someone would recognize the scent on his neck. He died on February 22, 1987, after a routine gallbladder operation at New York Hospital. When his family went through the bag he had brought with him to surgery, they found something they had not expected: a bottle of Estée Lauder Youth Dew, the 1953 Oriental he had carried like a rosary in his pocket. At his funeral the following week, his close friend Paige Powell stepped forward as the casket was being lowered into the ground and dropped a different bottle. Beautiful, the fragrance Warhol had loved most in the last 2 years of his life, into the grave on top of him. 14. John F. Kennedy, 1917 to 1963. JFK rotated through several fragrances over his life, and 3 of them have documented connections to him. The most institutional is Caswell Massey Jockey Club, the 1840 American formula sold today at the JFK Presidential Library and Museum Store on the strength of the documented connection. The most personal is 4711, the German cologne. According to a New York Daily News piece, one of his romantic partners later said she had to wash 4711 off her skin before going home to her husband. He wore it that strongly. The most cinematic comes from the perfume house, 8 and Bob. In the summer of 1937, 20-year-old Jack Kennedy was vacationing on the Côte d'Azur when he met an aristocratic French perfumer named Albert Fouquet at a hotel bar. The next morning, Fouquet left a sample of his cologne at Kennedy's room with a note. "In this bottle, you will find the dash of French glamour your American personality lacks." Kennedy wrote back from Boston asking for 8 more samples, and 1 for Bob. The Kennedy family has neither confirmed nor denied any part of the 8 and Bob story since. The house still bottles its perfume hidden inside a hollowed book. The detail is a nod to the family butler, who continued making the cologne after Fouquet's death in a 1939 car accident, smuggling bottles past the Nazi occupation inside cutout novels. 15. Carolyn Bessette-Kennedy, 1966 to 1999. In the early 1990s, when Carolyn Bessette was in her 20s and working at the Calvin Klein offices on West 39th Street, she would walk to a street vendor in Midtown Manhattan and buy a small glass vial of Abdul Karim Egyptian musk oil. The bottle cost a few dollars. She kept a rollerball on her for midday touch-ups, and she brought extras back to the office to pass around to the other women. 3 people who knew her have documented the oil in print. Michael Bergen dated Carolyn in the early 1990s, before her relationship with John, and writes about her musk oil in his memoir, The Other Man. Her close friend Carol Radziwill recalls it in What Remains. Elizabeth Beller's biography Once Upon a Time preserves the line Carolyn would offer as she handed the vial to a co-worker. "Try this oil. Doesn't it smell like clean first love?" Egyptian musk oil sits close to the skin. Warm and faintly sweet, it reads as the absence of a perfume rather than the presence of one. In a decade dominated by statement scents, Carolyn smelled like none of them. She smelled like herself. She wore the oil through her Calvin Klein years and into her marriage. On Cumberland Island in September of 1996, when she married John Kennedy in a private candlelit ceremony before 40 guests, the slip dress was designed by her closest friend at the company, Narciso Rodriguez. The same $20 oil was on her skin. 7 years after her death, Rodriguez asked the perfumers Christine Nagel and Francis Kurkdjian to compose a fragrance using Carolyn's musk oil as the conceptual seed. That is the same Francis Kurkdjian who had recreated Marie Antoinette's personal scent for Versailles 2 years earlier. 2 queens of 2 different centuries, traced by the same nose. The result, launched in 2003, is Narciso Rodriguez for her. Rodriguez has rarely spoken about the connection in public. Abdul Karim himself died in 2023, and the original vial, by then a $20 fragrance, left the market with him. 2,000 years before Carolyn Bessette paid $20 for a vial of musk on a midtown sidewalk, the multitudes on the riverbank at Tarsus caught the smell of Cleopatra's barge before they ever saw her face. If you have stayed with us this far, you are the kind of person Cultured Elegance was made for, a patron of storytelling.
Thank you everyone so much for watching Cultured Elegance. If you'd love to support the channel, you can become a channel member today by clicking Join at the bottom of the screen. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.